Well, hey, and welcome back. So before we dive into today's video, I just want to let you know that there is an email address in the video description. If you ever have any questions or feedback, or you want me to do a deeper dive in a separate video on any of this material, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to see what kind of questions you have, which things could be improved on, and just help me make this video series better. You can also leave a comment below in the YouTube comments, and I'll definitely get back to you there. And if you are enjoying the series, liking this video, subscribing to the channel would mean so much. Okay, back to the stars. So last time we really rounded out our understanding of the stars and how they're moving. And there's one thing I want to take a step back on and really emphasize as we transition to looking at the sun. We've so far noticed that there's two kinds of motion, right? The first is that daily or nightly motion for the sun and the stars, right? They're going from east to west, traveling in an arc. And if you were to just casually be an observer going outside on any random day, it would look like things are moving the same every day, right? East to west in an arc. But it only becomes apparent that things are different if you start to look at things more carefully and start to really keep track of your observations and make these more detailed comparisons. With the stars, we saw that different constellations would be rising in the east over time, and that all the stars were moving together. And that, on any given night, the motion is the same. You could say that the stars are going east to west in an arc. But over time, we see that something different's happening. And we also see that there's a cycle to it. That, a different constellation is rising in the east, but eventually the constellation will come back around and rise in the east again. And so there's this daily motion, but then there's this other kind of motion that's happening over longer stretches of time. And so now we want to transition to the sun and ask a similar question. We know the sun on a particular day is going from east to west, but now we want to know if something else is happening. Does the sun have a different kind of motion, or is it moving the same day after day? So let's start with a bit of a refresher on what we know about the sun and how it's moving. In one of the first videos we looked at, we saw that the sun was rising in the east and setting in the west, and that it was traveling in an arc, and that if we projected that arc, we would expect the sun to come back around and rise in the east again. And that's just what it does. And when we kind of took a step back and asked ourselves what this looks like, well, it looks a whole lot like the sun is going around the earth in a circle. And it looked like the stars were doing something similar. Now, remember, we're not describing how things actually are moving yet or what's actually going on. We're just trying to build up our understanding from first principles. Like, what do we actually see with our own eyes, and what does it appear on face value? And the next question we raise that we haven't really looked at yet is, if we followed the path of the sun day after day, would it be exactly the same, or would it change? Will we see it moving in a different way, or would we see it follow the exact same path through the sky? Now, with the stars, we saw that they were traveling along the same path night after night. Remember, we always saw them going east to west, and even when we compared them across nights, it seemed like their path was the same. Now, we did see that compared to the sun, they were going around once and a little bit further, but they were moving further along the same path that they had traveled the previous night. And so we want to try and see if something similar is happening with the sun, or if it's different. If we were to look at the sun day after day, would we see it following the same arc or not? And how might we figure this out? So a great place to start is to just pause and think about this question a little bit. Ask yourself about your experience living on Earth so far. What changes over time? And what of those changes might be dependent on the sun and how it's moving? You can even think about a single day and what changes over the course of a single day based off of the sun and how it moves. Start to ask yourself that question. What's it like in the early morning versus partway through the day versus later on in the evening? And once you've had a chance to think about this a little bit, come back and we can talk about it together. So if I think about what changes over the course of a single day, there are a couple things that really stand out. The first thing is that, at night it's dark, and then during the day it's light out. But not only that, in the early morning, as the sun is rising, it's starting to get light and brighter. And as we see the sun, it's getting brighter and brighter. And, throughout the day, it gets brightest when the sun's out fully, and then it starts to get darker again. So there's this gradual brightening of the sky until it's daytime, and then it starts to get darker until the sun sets. But we also see that the temperature kind of follows that same trajectory too, right? In the earlier morning, it's cooler. And then as the sun is out, you can feel that heat radiating on you. And as the sun spends more time out, it gets warmer and warmer and warmer. And the afternoons are the warmest. And then once the sun goes down, it starts to get cooler. So light and temperature seem to be, really dependent on the sun and how it's moving and where it is in the sky. Now, if we think about our experience over the course of time, what else changes that might be related to that light and temperature? So you're probably thinking the same thing as me, right? Over the course of time, we experience different seasons. And I don't know about you, but I love the summer months. I love that in the summer, when I go to work, it's warm and sunny outside. And when I leave work, it's warm and sunny outside. And in the winter, when I get to work, it's cold and dark. And when I leave work, it's cold and dark. Big difference, right? And so we experience this. In the winter months, the days are shorter and it's colder. And in the summer months, the days are longer and it's warmer out. But that's not all. We don't really notice these as drastic changes. It's not like you go to sleep one night and it was summer out and then you wake up and it's the middle of winter. No, these things happen gradually over time, and we have names for those transitionary seasons, right? Fall is that time between summer and winter as things are cooling down and starting to get, shorter days. And spring is that time of rebirth when the sun's getting out for longer, the plants are growing, flowers are blooming, and we're transitioning to those longer, warmer days. So we've got some really interesting clues so far about the sun and how it's moving. We've seen that over the course of a single day, how much light there is really dependent on where the sun is in the sky. When the sun's lower, like when it's rising or setting, it's not as bright out as when the sun's higher in the sky. And we also know that it gets warmer throughout the day, right? As the sun is spending more time out, the temperature rises. And we've seen that similar thing with the seasons, right? It gets warmer as the sun is spending more time in the sky and the days are longer. And we've seen this gradual change. And so what about the sun and how it moves might explain that, might explain the longer days? What would have to change about the sun's path through the sky in order to achieve that? We've seen on a single day that the sun goes from east to west in an arc. So what would have to change about that path or movement in order to explain the longer and then shorter days? One idea is that the sun might, in the summer months, be traveling slower, right? So it's spending more time in the sky because it's just going slower. Maybe it's pausing partway through the sky, then moving on in the summer months so that it spends longer time out, and the days are longer because of that. So think about what might be happening, some theories you might have about the sun's path, its arc through the sky, and what might be changing over time that could explain the seasons and this changing of seasons that we experience. And in the next video, we'll start to look at how we can make some observations and measure the sun's path so that we can figure out what's actually going on. So again, if you're enjoying this series, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time.